All right. Jim says, looks like a slow day of questions. So I'll add one more with regard to service companies like real estate. Which is more important in the website silo, service or location? For instance, would it be better to do service/city or city/service? Again, we were just having this conversation in our mastermind, actually. There's a lot of, Jim, I would recommend that you go to mgyb.co/process, I think it is. Let's just double check it. mgyb.co/process. I believe that's it. Yeah. And just, I've shared this in the mastermind many times, but now we put it behind an opt-in. So just go opt in and get this if you haven't before. It's the Semantic Mastery Entity-Based SEO, worryless SEO process. And that's essentially a process street training doc that I put together where I specifically talk about if you're dealing with a service area business, traditional silo structure can create a lot of headache for you because of precisely what you're mentioning here, okay? Which is, what in the hierarchy of your silo structure, what should come first? Your services with the locations as subcategories or supporting articles, right? So adding depth to those silos, or would it make more sense to have location-based silos with your services added as subcategories, right? So depth to that silo. And that's what you'll find is it's very difficult to do if you cover more than just one location, like one city, for example. So if you were to cover like 2 or 3 cities or a county with multiple localities within the county, so like, towns, for example, then what happens is if you try to duplicate services underneath like town names, or so for example, like say you have, town 1, service 1 and 2 underneath town 1, but then you have town 2 and you try to put service 1 and 2 under town 2. Does that make sense? Then what happens is it creates like these really funky URL issues in WordPress. And it's kind of difficult to get around that. And it makes a mess out of things. So the way that I typically do service area businesses is I will create regular silo structure using WordPress categories for the service-based silos, right? So again, those would be topical silos or service-based silos. But then I do the location siloing using tags because it's still a taxonomy, but it's a different way to do it. And I talk about how to do that in that process training that I just mentioned on a conceptual level anyways. But I kind of give examples of how, like, how to do that. But that's the way I do it because it eliminates completely any sort of like crazy, like funky issues that occur when you try to duplicate a subcategory across separate categories. That's where the problem arises. So I would encourage you to check that out and consider it that way. Because I try to separate those now and use normal category structure for topical or service-based silos. And then I use tags in a very strategic way to create location-based silos. I don't know if that, Marco, do you want to try to expand on that at all or what?
No, I mean, that the way that you work it and the way that I work it is a little bit different. But I mean, the best way to me, and what I have found is just the way that you described it. Because you can get into it's just those URLs in WordPress, you can get into such a mess.
Yes.
When you're trying to set it all up, that just to avoid all that, just separate them.
Yeah,
right? Just
I agree.
Keep it.
I agree. 100%.
So that's exactly how you do it. How you solve it then is really up to you. But I mean, we have training on it. Jim, join the mastermind, join the Heavy Hitter Club.
Yeah.
You're in here a lot asking these types of questions. You can benefit a whole lot from joining us in the mastermind and in the Heavy Hitter to get more in-depth questions where we can give them to you.
I agree. I try to stick with simple silo structure as much as possible too. And what you're describing here, I mean, this potentially could be a simple silo structure, but when you're trying to duplicate, no, and actually the way that you are showing it here would be a complex silo. And that's, again, it's funny because in the mastermind, there was a question, like I said, from a newer member that was asking something similar about, simple or complex silo structures. And before I got a chance to answer, Marco did. He was like, what should I use, simple or complex? And Marco said, keep it simple.
Keep it simple, man.
And totally agree, guys. I've said that for the last many years now is that I try to avoid complex silo structure as much as possible, because it's just like the name indicates, it complicates things. If you can, not only that, but again, I've been studying recently a lot lately about how link equity flows within a site, and been doing some testing and stuff. And the flatter that you can keep your site, so the less amount of levels that you build into your site, the better for internal link flow. And so again, like simple silo structures makes it easier to push link flow, internal link juice, link equity throughout the site than if you have, multiple levels deep. If you get into a complex silo structure and ultimately you end up having supporting blog posts too, you're talking about going all the way down to 3 levels deep. And that can create, unless you really know what you're doing with your internal linking structure, you can end up, losing potential with, link equity through those posts and things that can end up becoming orphaned and that kind of stuff. So whenever possible, try to use simple silo structure is what I'm saying. It'll make your life easier. And it also, in my opinion, unless you really know what you're doing, it's going to make your site stronger too, as a more shallow site, if that makes sense. Would you agree?
Absolutely. Absolutely. Keep it as simple as possible. You could, all right. So it keeps it's shallow in a sense, but you can always add topical depth through the post, right?
Correct.
Even if it's simple, as much as you want, or as much as it takes to get all of the relevance that's needed for the entity to become the best entity in the niche, which is what we're after.